Join us every Wednesday for InFocus, a weekly talk show produced by the St. Kitts Nevis Information Service, where we provide exclusives with key persons within the government and discuss pertinent, relevant, and interesting matters that affect us all. Tune in every Wednesday, live on ZIZ Radio and streamed live on Facebook at SKNIS Media and ZIZ Online. InFocus, your government, your business.
I'm Ian Richards, welcoming you to InFocus, a weekly program that takes a closer look at what's happening within and across the government of St. Kitts and Nevis. When you hear the letters UNESCO, UNESCO, it's easy to think of a big fancy building that's occupied by the United Nations Education and Cultural and Scientific Organization. But if you look around St. Kitts and Nevis, you'll find that UNESCO's footprints is everywhere, from the towering historic stones of Brimstone Hill to the pristine ridges of our Central Forestry Reserve, and even in the preservation of our rich folklore history and string band music. UNESCO isn't just about labels, ladies and gentlemen, it's a shield that protects our history, a global stage that elevates our culture, and a toolkit that is helping us to build a sustainable future. Joining us today to discuss more about UNESCO's support for St. Kitts and Nevis is Eric Falt, the Director of the UNESCO Regional Office to the Caribbean, Dr. Paul Hector, Advisor on Information and Communication at the UNESCO Regional Office, and also Her Excellency Nerys Dockery, Secretary General of the St. Kitts and Nevis UNESCO National Commission. Stay with us for this edition of InFocus. Thanks for staying with us, and allow me now to welcome back to InFocus for a while. It's been a while that Ms. Dockery, you've been with us. Welcome.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
You have two guests with you. We have
Yes, I do.
Mr. Falt, who is of course the UNESCO Regional Office, as I would have, the Director there, as I would have established in the opening, and Mr. Hector, you're from St. Kitts and Nevis.
Yes, I am.
So welcome to all of you to our program.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with you, Mr. Falt. Tell us a bit about yourself and your relationship at UNESCO, because of course you are the Regional Director now for the Caribbean, but tell us a bit about who you are.
Well, I guess I'm a bit of a veteran of UN affairs because I've served with the United Nations in 10 different countries for the last 35 years. Long time. But more recently as Regional Director for the Caribbean with UNESCO. I've been with UNESCO for some 15 years, and one of my previous positions was Assistant Director General for External Affairs. But I'm very happy to be back here and try to make a contribution in the fields of reference for UNESCO, which are, as you know, education, culture, the sciences, and of course communication and information. I'm not new to the region. I served also in Haiti a number of years ago for some 5 years, so I have some familiarity with the region prior to coming here.
All right, okay. Mr. Hector, we could probably get some information for you too. I'm not sure how many persons are aware, but as you mentioned, you're from St. Kitts and Nevis?
Yes, I'm from St. Kitts and Nevis. I was born on St. Kitts. Probably when I was about 6, I moved to Nevis with my parents who were in Vision, and I've lived there until it was time to go off to university to pursue my studies.
Okay. Which area in Nevis?
Bath Estate.
Okay.
Yes.
So shout out to the people over there.
Yeah, shout out to everyone in Bath Village.
Mr. Falt, let me come back to you now, because as you mentioned, of course, you're the Regional Director here, and my research has shown that you previously served as Regional Director also in India. You were based in India,
New Delhi, yeah.
Covered Southeast Asia, and that was from 2018 to 2022. But also, you were the Regional Director based in Morocco for Algeria, Libya, Mauritania, and Tunisia, and that was in 2022 to 2025. Indeed. Now you're here in the Caribbean. How different is that transition going to be working from those larger countries to small island states, given, of course, that there are so many different challenges?
Well, I think the challenges are the same worldwide. I mean, we're here this week discussing a lot media and information literacy, and the challenges that you encounter around the world are also true in the region. But there are, of course, specifics in terms of the small island developing states, and so you have to adjust everywhere you go and try to First and foremost, I would say listen and understand what the governments and the people of the region aspire to the most. I think, for instance, the issue of climate change has impacted a lot the region, and we're trying to see in our areas of competence again how we can be useful. But we always try to respond to the needs. We're not here to impose any agenda. We're there to adapt, again within the mandate of UNESCO, to the wishes of the governments and the people. That's a very important notion to underline. So in that sense, it's always very different whether you are in New Delhi, as I was previously, or Rabat for the Maghreb region, and in this region. So the first 6 months or so, I always try to understand what is more important or different about the region, so that we can cater better to and support better the countries of the region.
Mr. Dockery, let me bring you in here now. And how important is it to have Mr. Falt visit at this particular time?
Well, it's indeed a pleasure and a privilege and honor to have him with us. We feel very special because we have been singled out almost as one of 2 countries that Mr. Falt, given his very busy schedule, has agreed to visit, at least in the first instance, considering that he has recently transitioned. And so we are very proud to be able to have him with us. He was specially invited by our ambassador, and I must reference that I am Ambassador Nerys Dockery, yes, but I am the Secretary General for the UNESCO, for the St. Kitts and Nevis National Commission for UNESCO, whereas we have a permanent representative to the UNESCO in the person of Ambassador Dr. David Doyle, who resides in Paris and represents us there at the UNESCO headquarters. So at this time, he came for 2 reasons, both to introduce himself to the various officials, particularly those ministries and ministers who are advancing several projects in the areas such as education, heritage and culture, sports, and gender policy. And so we would get to go into some detail in terms of the progress of those projects, as well as perhaps areas for future cooperation with UNESCO and partnership. Also, St. Kitts and Nevis is presently hosting, jointly with the regional office in Jamaica, led by, spearheaded by Mr. Hector, but led by Mr. Falt, a special workshop designed towards media information literacy and cybersecurity, aimed at seniors as well as youth stakeholders, which tend to be in the spirit of inclusion. Let me say it in a positive sense. In the spirit of inclusion, UNESCO has provided this workshop that has many sessions that delves into topics that normally are not really directly, they don't directly address those audiences. So we've been able to single them out. We had a special session yesterday on cybersecurity for older adults, and there's one presently ongoing on media information literacy for youth stakeholders. So he's spoken at those workshops as well.
Let me speak a bit about those projects in particular, because of course they're 2 very important issues that you mentioned, and of course they have interest for the government. Cybersecurity and digitalization. Of course, we would have had recently, we would have seen the launch of the digital identification card systems, the stakeholder consultations taking place. So it's right in line with what the government is trying to achieve. And Mr. Hector, I suppose I should bring you in there. Talk to us a bit about what this project is all about, the MIL project.
Yes. Well, I think, as you know, today we live in a world where digitalization is really part and parcel of life. We've seen, for example, how social media, it's now given citizens the capabilities that once only national broadcasters had. So we're now able to engage in one-to-many communications. And with that, we see lots of different types of information. Some persons sometimes we don't even know who they are. You know, there's that famous saying, online you don't know if the person is a dog, who's, right? So I think in this context, it becomes very, very important for us to empower citizens with the ability to discern what is fact, what is fiction, to ask questions like, where is this message coming from? Who is sending it? What is their intent? What is their purpose? And again, this whole issue of information integrity becomes so important because based on the information that we have, that is the basis very often for the actions that we take. So it's really, really essential to know that, to ask those types of questions. To make,
Yeah, now that MIL project is a part of a larger project called the Sim Caribbean.
Yes.
Explain to us what that project is about. And that's for anyone, of course.
Paul.
Okay, so again, as we see, this whole region, we are again experiencing the digital revolution. We're seeing things like artificial intelligence coming. So what it means then, if our region is to really effectively participate, we need to be able to shape what's going on. So we need to have the necessary skills, the capacities, and of course that is part of what we're doing. Of course, we also need to have the necessary policies. But policies by themselves don't really make change. We need to also have persons who are aware, engaged, who can also give their own specific take on how these issues relate to us from a cultural perspective, economic perspective, identity, all these other aspects, so that it's something that really belongs to us. And it's really important, although if we're not engaged, it means then that we will just be accepting changes which are being forced upon us. We need to be able to exercise a certain level of sovereignty, and that comes from knowing.
Right, and absolutely, we would have seen recently viral videos from IShowSpeed, who is an influencer from the United States, and he did a Caribbean tour. And there was a lot of content and a lot of attention generated towards the region. Some persons questioned how impactful that they really were. Some persons wondering if that type of content really was a true reflection of what the Caribbean is and what we have to offer. But there are others who said that they are missing the point, that the idea is to be fun, chaotic, crazy, as the young people are. IShowSpeed himself is that way. And so it's important that you have persons who can put into context to frame really the message. And in terms of doing that, we as Caribbean people, we as persons from St. Kitts and Nevis, from Dominica, from St. Croix or wherever, we must be able to own and not let it be controlled. Basically, that's what you're saying. Right.
Yes, yes. And to add to your point, we have to recall that within the Caribbean, we are 60% youths under, I think it's 21 or 35. And here in St. Kitts, I think it's even up to 65%. So these are the future and they are the present. They are also the majority. And so when we relate and impart, we have to relate in their language, the language that they speak and what resonates with them. I think sometimes as older adults, coming from a different age, Gen Xers, like myself and yourself, we have a different idea of things. We see things through a more academic lens, whereas for the youth, it's more experiential. The second point is that because we are so young and because we are living in a digital age and we have to plug into the knowledge economy, we have to be able to educate and equip our young people in a way that takes advantage of the tools and the benefits of digitalization and social media and all of that, while at the same time protecting them against its perils, such as cyberbullying, such as technologically enabled gender-based sexual violence, scamming. And that's why also we specifically engaged seniors as well, because they're also a target when it comes to scamming in terms of unauthorized use of their pensions. They have to know how to engage online, understand what phishing is, understand that sometimes when you get a certain link in your WhatsApp message, do not click on it because it would give you a virus that would take all your information. So yesterday, they were actually quite engaged in these types of sessions that spoke to these topics, and they were able to share their experiences experiences and learn what not to do. And they themselves now, it was an audience of about 50, they're now ambassadors who will go into their families as older as the seniors to now teach and impart to their children and grandchildren about what they learned. And today with the youth, they are also charged to go into their schools and bring what they've learned today, because we only were able to cater to about 90 young people from various schools and civil society groups and so on, to go into their schools and impart what they would have learned. And we're hoping perhaps in the future we can replicate this workshop again to another cohort.
Maybe it's important to add though that this is not being just done in St. Kitts and Nevis. It's
Yes.
actually a collaborative activity. We have, for example, partnerships with national commissions in Antigua and Barbuda, in Dominica, Grenada, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, of course St. Kitts and Nevis as the host, and we also have other persons who have also joined from places like Trinidad, Curacao, etc. So basically, as I've said, it's an issue which is important for the Caribbean, and we're really helping countries to grow together, to share experiences, to learn from each other.
Yes.
Right, so I want to ask a bit about the media and information literacy. The term itself, of course, now it was coined back in UNESCO, by 2007. How has the definition evolved, given that technology is changed so rapidly, and now we are dealing with issues such as AI, deep fakes, as you mentioned about the dog, we don't know who's there, and also the instant social media sharing.
Okay. Well, again, as I think at the base of it, one of the things that MIL emphasizes is the need for continuous learning, continuous adaptation. So AI has been around for a long time. In fact, since the 1950s. It's only within perhaps the last 3 years that it's really entered the public imagination and understanding. It's moved from the realm of specialists and academics to the public space. And what you would see, for example, within the media and information literacy curriculum, we have also been evolving with those shifts and changes. So for example, we currently have programs which look at developing AI literacy skills, learning how to use tools to determine whether content online has been created by AI, for example. We are also recognizing the role, influence of, you talk about ISO speed, the role of social media and social influencers. So we've actually developed curricular content and also programs targeting those groups to help them to recognize the power that they have and the potential for doing a lot of good, but also doing harm. So again, introducing them to the ethical aspects and helping them to really take into hand that responsibility and to use it for sustainable development and for good.
Mr. Falt, let me bring you in here now because, of course, as we mentioned, the workshop took place a few weeks ago and you addressed the group. Why was it important for you to address the group and what were some of the messages that you conveyed to them?
Well, the messages are different whether if you address older persons and young persons. So we try to tailor the messages and what is important to each group. For older persons, as we know, all over the world, it's not just in the Caribbean, are often the victims of scams. So we need to explain to them, quite in detail, but in practical terms, how to avoid being prey to fraudulent activity. So that's more the angle that we chose with older persons. For young people, we have focused more on the misinformation and AI, the deep fakes that have been alluded to, because that's what they can be the victims of. So one of the key messages that we had for them, that I had for them, is verify before you click and transmit. It's very important because very quickly young people tend to see an information on their telephone and then to share it with maybe 10 or 20 others. That's how sometimes a lot of damage is done. That's how a lot of mistrust for governments, for instance, spreads, and we're really trying to educate them about what to do and not to do. Education, of course, in general is a very big aspect of the UNESCO mandate, and aside from issues related to communication and information, for the 3 days of our visit, we focused a lot on this aspect. We met in particular with Minister Hanley to discuss a number of important issues in the field field of education. I would like to stress perhaps one that is very important and that I'm sure many of your viewers will relate to. That is the issue of boys' education. For many years, again, around the world, we have focused extensively all of our efforts on girls' education. And there was obviously a need to. 50 years ago, this was an issue. Today, we've reached a stage where girls and boys in school are more or less at the same level, and in many cases, the girls are more numerous and more advanced. So we have reached a stage, especially in the Caribbean, where we need to pay more attention to boys' education. You know, earlier I was telling you that we try to listen to what people tell us and governments tell us is important. That is one of the issues that has come up in a major way. All over the Caribbean, we see the school dropout from the boys. We see that it's having a major impact on underperformance and disengagement from education. This is a very big problem because then it leads to other societal ills. We know that the violence in various societies stems in part, well, almost exclusively from boys most of the time, and stems from the fact that they're not educated, have given up on school, and sometimes are not able to find employment. So this issue of boys' education is very important. So that's the first and foremost issue that we discussed this week with the Minister of Education, and I invited him to join us later this year in Jamaica for a major regional Caribbean conference which will take place focusing only on this issue. It is actually the first time that UNESCO is bringing to the fore worldwide this particular issue, and we hope that it will derive in a lot of reflection globally, regionally, and of course at the level of St. Kitts and Nevis, and that we can all agree on look at best practices, you know, what is being done in various countries to counter the lack of performance of boys in the field of education, and perhaps establish a Caribbean framework so that we can get out of what is increasingly looking like a societal rut.
Yes,
Right.
yes. Can I add to that? Just to mention specifically that on the issue of boys in education, that with the assistance of UNESCO and funding, major funding over the last 3 years, I believe, we have just finalized the national gender policy with the Ministry of Gender Affairs and Social Protection. And so that is a major win for us. It will soon be tabled into Cabinet and in Parliament. And it addresses specifically those gaps that he mentioned in terms of boys, to the point where with some of the unused funds we are hosting for International Boys Day jointly with the ministry, just some series of engagements with primary school boys in the first one instance and secondary school boys to just hear from them about what their challenges are, what their experiences are, so that that too can also be inform the way that the ministry addresses these issues moving forward. And it also allows us to establish a database that allows the ministry to pursue evidence-based decision making better. So we're very thankful to UNESCO for that as well.
I want to come back to the gender policy a bit later because that's a different and a new issue that persons may not be aware of, and so we want to give that some time. But I just want to go back. A final question about the technology aspect of it and the use of AI, because as we established, UNESCO is concerned about education, UNESCO is concerned about culture. How much of a risk does AI pose to undermining culture and education?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's important to, that's something that we try to do all the time, to say that we should embrace AI. We should not be afraid of AI. It's not something that is coming into the future. It's here now, and it has been for some time, and it's moving very, very rapidly. UNESCO has offered a number of principles. First and foremost, all member states of the organization in 2023 adopted a recommendation on the ethics of AI. So it's a series of recommendations, as the name implies, in relation to this particular topic. We have to ensure that those who construct the tools and those who use the tool do so in an ethical manner. That is one of our key considerations, and we're actually accompanying governments throughout the region to look at their state of readiness when it comes to AI. So we do reports in different countries. We have just unveiled one in Trinidad and Tobago and in Jamaica, for instance. Around the world, we have done 70 country level readiness assessment, and that's one of the ways in which we help governments take stock of where they are in terms of AI and what they can do to better prepare themselves and their population with regards to this rather formidable tool, which can look scary to some. So again, this is a passage that we're going through. It's perhaps one of the most significant transitions we're undergoing right now because of AI when we look at the world. And we need to collectively reflect and then also have individual measures and policies. So that's one of the things that we recommend, a number of policies that are applicable or relevant to the country. We don't come in with an expert from New York or Berlin to tell people here what to do. We work with local people within a set of universally acceptable standards that UNESCO has already determined.
Yes.
Maybe I can also just add to that. And again, of course, these studies which Eric referred to are being implemented here. We've also been working on something called the Caribbean Artificial Intelligence Policy Roadmap, which again looks specifically at the region and looks at how to match AI and its capabilities so that it can, of course, meet the needs, the opportunities, challenges within the region. And this roadmap, it looks at 4 specific areas. The first area is culture and creativity. It is hopeless to bring any new tool if we do not take into account the culture, the receptivity to it, because this is something which is very much linked to people and the identity. The second area that it looks at, it's the area of governance and accountability. As Eric just mentioned, we are very much looking at ethics, human rights embedded into the use of these tools, so looking at how these tools are deployed, governed, ensuring that persons are accountable. If everyone is going to really benefit from it, if we're going to uptake it, education is really key. So that's the third pillar, education and upskilling. And the fourth one, we know that our region is perhaps the region most at threat to climate change, natural hazards of various types. And so, of course, we need to make sure, and this is a survival issue also, we need to make sure that AI is being used to support the resilience and sustainability. And we can think about this in a number of dimensions: economic, social, infrastructure. That we're using these tools to, for example, help to guide us, for example, in where to site, identifying those areas which may be a threat from storm surge, etc., and avoid developing there, and so forth. Yes. So those 4 areas, and this is something which was the outcome of not just UNESCO's effort, but again, collective discussion which involved more than 1,000 persons and institutions across the region. And this is something which is being considered by CARICOM as a sort of framework to guide the region.
Yes, and again, this is another area where St. Kitts and Nevis has benefited tremendously from UNESCO's technical support as well as funding support. We also have just finalized for the first time the National Intangible Cultural Heritage Policy, and AI and how it interacts with our culture as well as our creators and culture bearers, our musicians, our artisans, and so on, it it has an entire section as to how to ameliorate that and how to regulate that. It's currently being pursued by the Ministry of Culture and the Creative Economy. We've benefited from a UNESCO consultant in the person of Nigel Encolada, and he's working along with Director Pierre Liebert in finalizing that as we speak. And so we have to, as small island developing states, embrace AI and technological advances as the fact that they are happening and that they are inevitable, right? Because it's already begun, and we don't want it to outpace us. But at the same time, we need to have a voice as well in terms of managing and regulating the pace at which it's being pursued, as well as to allow us time to absorb not just the positive effects but also the negative effects, and to establish regulatory frameworks that can deal with that. I had an interesting conversation with my son one day when we were watching a documentary by Oprah Winfrey, where she was interviewing some of the personalities that are pushing the AI agenda, such as Elon Musk and so on. And after the interview, I asked him a question. I said, well, this is the world that you're going to inherit, so you need to be prepared. He said, but Mom, I wasn't asked whether this is the future I want, a future with robots, a future that might create more joblessness for the actual human beings and create all kinds of residual social issues. He said, we weren't asked. We like the world exactly as it is. It's your generation that is pushing this agenda. And so we have to be mindful as small island states, as youthful countries, that we need to have a voice even currently in the debate, because we can't just accept it as a given. So within the UN, UNESCO, we have First Committee, where we address regulation of these types of global issues, like weaponization of space, advancements of AI, and we just have to make sure that we have a voice, even in managing the process as it proceeds. So,
Mr.
yes.
Hector, let me get I just wanted to weigh in on that point that
just to build on what Nerys was just referring to, you know, the workshops which have been held, media and information literacy. You asked the question about how is it evolving, and so again, recognizing the needs of the region, recognizing the needs of the youth, we're bringing the tools so that, of course, they can be prepared to really safely and effectively navigate these changes, and not just accept. Because again, we don't want our region to be shaped by rules which are created and established elsewhere. We want to be at the table and to be part of that process of making and shaping these rules. And so, of course, by working with the youth, giving them voices, opportunities. I talked about the 1,000 individuals and institutions that we consulted with. Youth was also a very, very important stakeholder group, which we worked with in terms of shaping and crafting this Caribbean artificial intelligence policy roadmap. So.
Yeah, it's the bottom of the hour, and I wish we had more time to touch on these topics, but it's a fascinating discussion. But
permit me to add one more thing in terms of what we've already achieved. Science, we've just put forward a proposal for funding with UNESCO to establish a national science policy as well. And by all indications, it will be approved. And that element is also the AI and how we engage, how we regulate, how we govern. That space is also going to be part of that national science policy. So we've benefited in the amount of exceeding $100,000 from UNESCO towards the ICH policy, as well as we're looking at another investment of about $50,000 towards the science policy.
Right. So I do want to touch on those priorities. That will be our next discussion.
Yes.
So I think we're going to leave it at a good point there, and then we're going to take our break and come back.
Okay.
Stay right there, viewers and listeners. We'll be right back with more In Focus.
What if your child's journey to wealth could begin with a single step? Through Aspire, every young citizen aged 5 to 18 receives $1,000 EC dollars, half in savings, half invested in their future. Financial education for life. today. Give your child a future of financial freedom. Don't wait for wealth to knock. Create it with Aspire.
If you haven't done it as yet, please do it today. Subscribe to our YouTube page at SKNIS Media for regular updates, live coverage, and even more information on your government. While you're at it, like, share, and interact with our Facebook and Instagram pages at SKNIS Media and SKNIS Info.
Thanks for staying with us when we continue our discussion with UNESCO officials. They are Mr. Eric Falt, who is the Director of UNESCO Regional Office in the Caribbean. He's based in Kingston, Jamaica, sir. We have Nerys Dockery, Her Excellency, who is the Secretary General of the St. Kitts and Nevis UNESCO National Commission, and also Mr. Paul Hector, who is the Advisor on Information and Communication at the Regional Office, also in Jamaica. We touched a lot on technology and science. We want to talk now a bit about culture and UNESCO, and how UNESCO really can be felt by persons on the ground. Yeah. Because it's a UN agency, but there are a lot of persons who feel that some of the international agencies, they don't really do much. They don't really get the feel of the work that are being done. So, Ms. Dockery, probably we can start with you and tell us a bit about some of the priorities that the National Commission has in terms of implementing projects here in St. Kitts and Nevis. And of course you would have touched on them. You started with a gender policy.
Well, speaking to the culture and heritage elements that you just mentioned, that is an area for certain where UNESCO is certainly felt in the Federation. We have, as I said, we've just finalized the National Intangible Cultural Heritage Policy. That was about 3 years worth of consultations and effort, and it's culminated now with the finalization of that policy and it being tabled in Parliament. We also, as you know, physically are a UNESCO World Heritage country with our Brimstone Hill National Park and Fortress. We also are inscribed, we have one item inscribed on the UNESCO Memory of the World list, which is our slave register, right? That is the only item we have inscribed, and we're looking to explore more. And presently we are also engaged in a consultancy to do the deep dive to present 4 sites to UNESCO to be on their tentative list for an additional World Heritage site. Hopefully the evidence would bear it out that that site can be located on Nevis. But we are exploring 4 sites at the moment. The lead consultant is our very own Dr. Cameron Gill, who, as you know, is a lead scholar and author in the area of history and heritage, and he would have recently even returned from London, where he has been doing some deep research in the various libraries there and museums there as well. And so if once successful, one of those 4 sites will be selected by UNESCO, so that we will have 2 World Heritage sites located in the Federation and not just 1.
What are the benefits of having an inscription?
Visibility, for one thing. I mean, I'm sure you're aware, but there are literally millions of people around the world who decide on a destination for their travel based on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And I can assure you that from the visitors to those who come out of cruise ships are all aware that the Brimstone Hill Fortress National Park is on the UNESCO World Heritage List. And many of them want to come to St. Kitts because they know this has happened. So this is, of course, the decision, the proposal came from the government of St. Kitts and Nevis, but that has had a major impact. So you are getting a lot of visitors only for that reason. So yes, I agree with Nerys that it would be beneficial to have a second World Heritage Site either on St. Kitts or Nevis. That's to be debated. It's a decision by the government and a proposal that needs to be made to the UNESCO Secretariat. Mind you, these things take time.
Yes,
I just want to be fair and make sure that your viewers understand that this is not something that can happen. You know, you put in a proposal and it happens a month later. It takes literally years. It's already extremely significant that you had this first inscription. There are not that many World Heritage Sites in the Caribbean, unfortunately, and it is recognized because it is an outstanding, well-preserved example of a 17th and 18th century military architecture in the Caribbean region. That's why it was recognized. So yes, let's hope that there will be another one which will give even more reasons for visitors to come and visit St. Kitts and Nevis. That's all on the sites, which is, well, what UNESCO is, for better or for worse, best recognized for. There are many other possibilities within the realm of culture. We are hopeful indeed that through the efforts of the National Commission led by Nerys Dockery and through the efforts of the government, there will be also soon an element inscribed on the Intangible Cultural Heritage List of Humanity, which is another separate register maintained by UNESCO and which recognizes the living heritage. Right now they have just, but I'm sure Nerys will be able to say more, nominated the file of the masquerade traditions of St. Kitts and Nevis. Again, it takes time, but that's something that is on the close horizon, probably 2027. Yes. So that's something that should be coming and will be an opportunity for the world to know a little bit more of St. Kitts and Nevis through a UNESCO prism. That's what these labels, to call them that way, bring to a country. St. Kitts and Nevis is already very well positioned with a World Heritage Site, with a Memory of the World inscription, as mentioned. Hopefully next year an inscription on the Intangible Cultural Heritage List of humanity. And you also have, very important, I really would like to talk about that, a biosphere reserve in St. Mary's, which is recognized as a UNESCO biosphere reserve. So you've already achieved a lot. Again, a lot of people come to St. Kitts, want to visit, not just because they know you have a beautiful two beautiful islands, but because also you have sites, you have living traditions, and because you have important records of documentary heritage recognized through the Memory of the World program.
Right. Yes, and if I could just add to that, something equally important is the benefits in terms of us being and establishing a regional best practice and model.
But before you get there, because you mentioned additional site possibly being considered. Do you want to mention what that site is?
Oh, the 4 sites, the 4 cases.
For World Heritage.
Yes, the 4 sites are the Bath Hotel and Hot Springs.
That's in Nevis.
In Nevis, that's the one for Nevis. And then we have Charles Fort as an extension of the Brimstone Hill as another military. And we also have the Bloody Point, Bloody River, and Petroglyphs Corollary, because it also speaks to a genocide that took place of our indigenous peoples, and it was one of the first, I guess, massacres that would have taken place. So in honor of that heritage, we've put that forward. And the third is the Keon Cotton Ginnery. But I just also want to add, there's also something, a credential under UNESCO called the Places of Memory linked to the transatlantic trade in Africans and enslavement. And we are currently working on putting forward an application for the Wingfield Estate and Manor to be inscribed or to receive that credential as well and be part of that network. Wingfield Estate, as you know, was the landing site of our first colonizers. It was also the home of the Kalinago peoples. They literally were camped there, and that is where the chief that met the colonizers was murdered as well. Chief Tegreman, as you know. So right on that actual location, right on that soil at Wingfield Estate. All of these things happened. So we know that it is very much deserving of a designation with UNESCO.
Dr. Hector, it looks like you wanted to jump in.
Well, maybe I can sort of make the link between culture and technology. Currently, over in Nevis, one of the projects that we have underway, it's in collaboration with the Nevis Historical and Conservation Society. They have collections of documents dating back to the 1600s. Many of these documents are fragile and becoming at risk of mold, damage, etc. It's really important that we examine these records. It gives us a lot of context. As you know, we talk about the roots of enslaved persons. Having the documents which give us the names of the persons who actually were there, that adds a very tangible, it adds another very important layer to the monuments, the sites. What we're doing is we are working with them, we're providing the digitization equipment so that these records can be put in electronic format, and then of course the originals can then be conserved in controlled environments where they can be kept, hopefully for posterity. It's not just about digitizing the records. We also, the project also envisages kiosks so the public can come and see what is there. We've heard stories about persons coming from overseas trying to find information about relatives who were there, perhaps a grandfather who had, and coming across records and having that sort of closure, very important. We're also looking. We also know in a digital age, citizens increasingly are capturing photos, different types of memories on their smartphones. So I think the appreciation for maintaining those legacies, I think it's something which the public is becoming more aware of, and there has also been many persons coming forward, trying to offer these mementos which allow us to see the way our cities or towns looked years ago. And this provides a lot of information for scholars, and it also helps us to understand how climate change is unfolding, how erosion is impacting our society, etc.
Right. And Dr. Falt, before I talk a bit about the intangible cultural heritage, I just want you to mention, because as we established, Brimstone Hill Fortress is a heritage site. Is there support given from UNESCO other than that recognition? Is there support to help to maintain the whatever heritage site around the world in whatever condition it is?
It depends. First and foremost, the maintenance of World Heritage Sites is the responsibility of the government, of the country concerned. But in some cases, we can and we do help. We have helped here through the National Commission in a variety of ways, and we will continue to do so. We can do that in St. Kitts and Nevis, and we will not do it in a Western European country. We try to be especially attentive to small island developing states. Just perhaps of interest to your viewers, there is a special additional budget which is allocated by the member states only for small island developing states. So it means that my office in Kingston receives more money as a UNESCO office than one that is located, let's say, somewhere in Latin America. That's very important. There is this recognition that SIDS deserve special attention. It is, if I had to date it, 20 years old now, 20 years ago, within the UN, people started to realize that there needed to be more attention, more emphasis, more support for small island developing states, and now this support is here.
Yes, and I'd like to add to that where there is a will, there's a way, and we have an ambassador in Dr. Doyle who does not take no for an answer. And so just to your point on how Brimstone Hill can be supported, there is a facility with UNESCO called an International Assistance Program that it's normally very specific towards when you're trying to protect or preserve something. And the consultancy for Dr. Gill to do this deep dive on the tentative list was achieved through one of those tranches of about $10,000 US. And we are also looking to work with Mr. Percival Hanley, as you know, who is one of the managers at the Brimstone Hill National Fortress, to obtain another tranche of international assistance to help to upgrade their museum, replace the display cases and so on, and work with the university to get a consultant to guide them with that. So there are ways to unlock funding within UNESCO. You just have to be creative and committed.
Absolutely. Now, as we speak about the ICH, which is the intangible cultural heritage, now, UNESCO has often emphasized the importance of heritage in small and developing states that you would establish. How does a nomination like this from St. Kitts and Nevis to have our folklore recognized by UNESCO contribute to the global diversity of ICH?
Well, I think this is why this particular convention, because everything relates to a UNESCO convention, was adopted. For a long time, we were talking about World Heritage Sites only. Only in 2003 did the member states of UNESCO decide to have a separate convention to recognize diversity of expressions, diversity of traditions, diversity of cultures, simply through the living heritage. That's why it's important to see it recognized also in this way. And St. Kitts and Nevis, I hope will be very successful in this nomination, and I hope that we can all celebrate next year when the masquerade traditions of St. Kitts and Nevis are recognized as a universal element.
Yes.
I mean, I really would like to share with you that the voice of St. Kitts and Nevis matters on the world stage, and certainly within UNESCO. Whether it is Ambassador Doyle, who ably represents St. Kitts and Nevis in UNESCO, whether it is Ms. Dockery here within the network of national commissions, whether it is also through the presence in our ranks as UNESCO staff of Paul Hector, St. Kitts and Nevis is very well recognized. And I'm very happy actually that I was able to travel here, inspired by Paul, who inevitably, when he goes somewhere, gets a lot of attention when he says that he's from St. Kitts and Nevis. I can tell you that it sparks instantly an entire conversation, and he's very proudly, even though he doesn't represent St. Kitts and Nevis, he very proudly talks about his country. He was born in St. Kitts, grew up on Nevis, and I can tell you it transpires very much in what he does and what he says. He helps us also who come from faraway lands to understand many of the specificities and the sensitivities of the Caribbean. So St. Kitts and Nevis matters at UNESCO, and we are here very much to support as whenever we can and in every way possible.
Yes, yes. And also in addition to that, in terms of the universal value that we have pushed to be able to have this approved, is the distinct nature of our Christmas sports or folklore traditions. And let me just say that we decide there are two ways we could have pursued this. We could have identified the one that we think would capture the most value and put forward that one, but we decided to do it as a group. Try that first, and then if that doesn't work, we would whittle it down to one at a time and to see which one. But as a collection, these Christmas sports, as you know, arose out of a response to enslavement. As you know, during enslavement, our people were not allowed to relax. They had about one day, which is a Sunday, where they can have some downtime. And during that time, they came up with all of these different art forms to both remember their African traditions, and secondly, to almost, it was almost to cast their experience in a more satirical form, as you know, with the bull and the whips being used and the clowns, to kind of make a mockery and to be able to process their pain through the lens of humor, to make it easier for them. Part of it was also a little bit of imitation in terms of, like, for instance, with our actors. When fairs from Europe came, and circuses and so on, the actors was one of the things that they would have seen, and they came up with their own using the pitchforks and the tools that they had at their disposals. So this is definitely of universal value, because the slave experience, even though we all have that experience within the English-speaking Caribbean and the French-speaking Caribbean, the responses to it are unique and distinct. And St. Kitts is happy to be the first. I understand from Mr. Falt that several other islands are looking at their folklore traditions, but we are the first past the goalposts of actually conducting that work. Extensive consultations were done, detailed video presentation and written presentations have been made, not just capturing our folklore traditions in St. Kitts, but also in Nevis, to show that even the ones in Nevis are distinct and different from the ones in St. Kitts.
And that's so, if you would have seen the comedy of the mansion ball, it's something that certainly you should be accustomed to. But Dr. Hector, I think you wanted to weigh in as well too. I saw you making some notes.
Oh, yes. No, just agreeing with everything, and I'm very happy at the progress that St. Kitts and Nevis are making in terms of utilizing the opportunities that UNESCO is presenting.
I proposed earlier to talk about the UNESCO Biosphere Reserve.
That's exactly what
and if you don't mind, I want to talk about that a little bit, because yes, I see time is running out. So for your viewers, again, just a word of explanation of what is a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, different from a World Heritage Site of UNESCO. Well, essentially, we consider biosphere reserves as living laboratories for sustainable development. We talk a lot about the environment these days, and it's a primary preoccupation of many people, and rightly so. So when we talk about environmental issues, there's often messages of doom and gloom that we transmit to the younger generations. Everything is bad, there's plastic in the ocean, the sargassum is growing every year more, and so on and so on and so on. We desperately need to also give messages of hope to the younger generations. And that's what biosphere reserves are. They are locations, natural locations, sometimes parks, but where there are human settlements within, and where humans interact harmoniously with nature. This is a concept that started in the 1970s, and that has not been espoused so much in the Caribbean, which is regrettable, because it's a perfect fit for the Caribbean. You already have one, that is the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve, which was nominated back in 2011, and it is a site for biological diversity, comprising cloud forests, mangroves, and coral reefs. I had a chance to see it as well, but where humans also live. So that is what a Biosphere Reserve is. So in addition to a World Heritage Site and everything else we have mentioned, you also have this incredible label of UNESCO, which should be cherished. I hope actually that soon, we were in Nevis also to discuss with the authorities there, maybe there could be a possibility of having a second separate designation in Nevis, because there again you have extraordinary biodiversity and interaction over many generations with humans, which should be noticed and cherished, as I said. And one of you asked me earlier, what is the benefit? Again, the voice of St. Kitts and Nevis is always widely heard on the world stage. Only a few months ago, there was the big meeting of UNESCO Biosphere Reserves in China, and we had an occasion to hear from Ms. Telka Wallace, who's the coordinator for the Man in the Biosphere program, who shared the experience of the St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve with the world, essentially. So people heard what you do here on that world stage also. That is also what UNESCO allows you to do, supports in many ways. Biosphere reserves are a perfect tool within all of the elements that we have at our disposal at UNESCO, and we're pushing it very hard right now. Within a couple of weeks, I'm revealing something maybe that is not yet in the public eye, but Aruba will be the third biosphere reserve designated in the Caribbean, and we're working also very closely with other countries, including St. Lucia, including Jamaica, St. Martin, and Guyana, and we were very recently in Antigua. I hope that there can be an interest also in having a biosphere reserve in Antigua. That is the way forward. That is one of the ways to protect the environment by giving a specific label while allowing development that protects the nature
in a sustainable way.
Yes, and in terms of some of the tangible ways that the people who are part of the Biosphere Reserve benefit from is that with UNESCO UNESCO perceives biosphere reserves as learning centers and test cases for sustainable development. They provide logistical support for the building of sustainable livelihoods with farmers, with ecotourism, on heritage tourism, and also in terms of biodiversity conservation. The St. Mary's Biosphere Reserve is one of the areas that are unique because all of these things interact in that space between Canada Estate and Atlas. You would have heard of the sea turtles, which is an endangered species, the leatherback sea turtles and the hornbill turtles. So along Keon Beach, that's the nesting site for the sea turtles. So we're able to advocate and create some awareness around that. And then we also have the foothills, which is close to the Central Forest Reserve. And we have many farms in the areas, that's also on the agriculture belt, Keon,
right.
Green Valley. And so there are farmers in the area who we are able to help educate in terms of sustainable farming practices. We have a collaborative farming project at Hermitage Estate where we plan to bring that to life. We were able to get some additional funding with the assistance of the government of Japan and UNESCO's Earth Network initiative, where we are seeking to attract $1.1 million towards building out that space and establishing seed banks and shade houses there so that persons who visit the space can see what sustainable farming can look like, as well as to preserve some of our indigenous seeds for our indigenous fruits. So those can be propagated into the future.
Right, and of course the government's proposed ban on single-use plastic, which of course has been implemented since then. There was a pilot project that was done in the Biosphere Reserve as well too.
Yes.
And so we see it being used as a model.
As a test case,
Yes, we can sustainably develop and keep the environment protected.
Yes, and we that's one of the things that we try to do and promote, the fact that there are 3,000 people within that space, and when legislation is passed, it's easy to monitor and evaluate by looking at the St. Mary's Biosphere and how these policies impact that space. So for the rollout of the national ban on single-use plastics, we were able to pursue a campaign of zero plastics in the Biosphere Reserve and engage with stakeholders to both assess attitudes and behaviors, and then to before and then attitudes and behaviors after we completed that sensitization project. So these are many ways. We have schools in the area. Right now, another project that we are benefiting from, which is Education for Sustainable Development. We have advocated that the St. Mary's Biosphere be incorporated into that program so all of our schools can visit SMBR and learn. They can conduct field trips, they can learn about it, and that can be incorporated into how you teach our children about conservation and climate action and those things.
Okay, Ms. Dockery, we will have to leave it there, unfortunately. But before we do, a final question that I have, and I'll direct it to Dr. Hector, and that would be, as Mr. Falt mentioned, of course, how passionate you are in representing St. Kitts and Nevis. They're actually
he doesn't represent St. Kitts and Nevis.
No,
like I don't represent my country, but indirectly it comes in the conversation.
Yes, of course. There are actually two persons. You are one who work within UNESCO, and so I think that gives a real sense of people that UNESCO isn't just, as I mentioned, this international agency out there, but there are job opportunities that our persons can take up as well.
Yes. What I would say is this: I'm really grateful to UNESCO. Through UNESCO, I've been able to work, live, explore, implement projects in more than 100 countries around the world. And today, thanks to those networks that I've built and those experiences, I'm now back in the Caribbean. And I can now connect the Caribbean to the rest of the world to learn, share, develop, grow. And this is really essential. The more we understand each other, the better prospects for peace and prosperity.
And the second person at UNESCO is?
Von Michael Martin.
Right, and most persons will be familiar with him here.
Yes.
And so, Ms. Dockery, you can come back at any time. So I'll give the final word to Dr. Falt.
Well, thank you for giving us an opportunity to come and address your viewers here in St. Kitts and Nevis. For me, it has been 3 days of intense discovery. I learned, of course, as I said, through Paul and beyond about St. Kitts and Nevis. But as you can see, there's a lot of activities that are going on. And the relay, if you want, of UNESCO on a daily basis is the National Commission. And you've seen that our work, even though people don't necessarily know about it, extends to many parts and many aspects of the daily life of many Kittitians and Nevisians. Did I say it right?
That's right.
Whether it is in education, in culture, in the sciences, and of course, especially this week in communication and information, we try to be relevant, we try to be helpful. But again, thank you very much for hosting us this week.
I think we're going to have a lot of fun with you during your tenure here. Absolutely. You seem very passionate.
Yes,
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Falt, Ambassador Dockery, and of course Dr. Hector for being with us on InFocus.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here.
And we'd like to thank you, viewers and listeners. We trust that you will join us next week at the same place at the same time for another edition of InFocus. Remember, here on our program we discuss your government, your business. I'm Ian Richards.